All right, good evening, everyone. Like I said earlier, it's good to see everyone who I can see. If you're comfortable, turn on your video. I invite you to do that. Again, only if you're comfortable. It's good for everyone to see each other. We're supposed to be able to see our teachers when they teach us. I don't know if it is the opposite, that the rabbi is supposed to be able to see the students, but I'll certainly enjoy seeing whoever I can see. And thank you everyone for joining us tonight. And again, it's wonderful to be with everyone. It's really a great honor for us to have Rav Schachter with us here tonight for this very special shir. I'll give a brief interview. Introduction. Everyone is here to hear Rav Schachter, so I don't want to take away that time, but we should give him the honor that he certainly deserves. Rav Herschel Schachter, Moray Varabi, is one of today's world-renowned Talmudic scholars and has had an extremely illustrious and long rabbinic career. At the age of 22, he was appointed as the shir assistant to Rav Soloveitchik. At the age of 26, in 1967, he was appointed as the youngest Rosh Yeshiva at Yeshiva University's Rabbi Isaac Elchanan Theological Seminary, where he now holds the Nathan and Vivian Fink Distinguished Professorial Chair in Talmud. And since 1971, Rav Schachter has been the Rosh Kollel of the Marcus and Adina Katz Kollel as part of the Smicha program. In addition to teaching at Yeshiva University, Rav Schachter is the senior posek for the OU's Kashrus division, and he teaches all across the entire world. He usually spends some of his summer with young high school boys at the NCSY Kollel. He has written at least 6 sefarim, I could be forgetting one, hundreds of halacha in Hebrew and English articles. He has approaching 6,000 shiurim on Torah, and Torah only went up towards the end of when Rebbe had already been teaching Torah for decades. And many of his popular shiurim and lectures, you can try out maybe his parsha shiurim, other special shiurim on Torah, are now being adapted in English books. Rav Schachter on the parshas, Rav Schachter on the holidays. We have at least one volume here in the Beis Medrash. And he is the source, the address that hundreds of rabbis in all times turn to ask questions, to discuss issues, to seek advice, receive inspiration, myself certainly included. Recently, many of his Halachik rulings have been published and publicized during the coronavirus pandemic. I'm not sure how many have been published, the 50 or 60. It's a small amount of the hundreds of questions that he has been asked. I'm part of a rabbinic WhatsApp group. There's always questions being forwarded, being asked to Rav Schachter, and just a small amount are what you see that are published. And the truth is that Rav Schachter always is and always has been an address where rabbis and lay people turn to very complex and sensitive halachic questions. And the current environment has really just opened up a window for people to see the wide range of issues that he deals with. And anyone who asks him a question is immediately struck with his warmth and humility and sensitivity and love of Torah and all Jews. Tonight, I'll be moderating and I'll ask Rav Schachter questions about some of his published psakim over the past 6 months. And Rav Schachter will have the opportunity to explain them a little bit, to give the background, explain the reasons a little bit more. If people have questions, you can type them to me in the chat box. We'll see how the evening goes. If we'll be able to include questions, how many. We have Baruch Hashem, a good crowd here tonight. But before Rav Schachter begins, it's also very important, I want to thank our sponsors tonight. And the shir is being sponsored by Kenny Whitman and Sandy Welks in memory of the 22nd yortzites of their parents, Sylvia Zichrona Livracha and Abraham Zichrona Livracha Whitman, who are former YI members, whose yortzites were observed recently on the 14th and 18th of Av. And it's very appropriate that Kenny and his sister are sponsoring. They have a very long relationship, and I've known Rav Schachter for maybe 50 years, since Rav Schachter was a young man coming up to Boston, young unmarried man, spent time with Rav Soloveitchik in the summer at onset. And I can tell you that the first time I went back to YU after having become the rabbi of the Young Israel of Brookline, I was talking to Rav Schachter and discussing different things and giving a report. And one of his questions to me in that first conversation was, is Mr. Whitman still alive? Referring to Kenny and Sylvia's father. So I'm sure it's very meaningful to Rav Schachter as well to have them as sponsors. I will present Rebbe the first question, and then I'll open up the floor. I'll let Rebbe share any general introductory remarks if you would like, and then begin discussing some of the halachic issues. So the first question I'd like Rebbe to discuss is that we all know that pikuach nefesh overrides all the mitzvos of the Torah except for the 3 cardinal sins. And even when there's just a risk to human life, there's a mitzvah, a halacha of nishmartem, me'ola nafshosechem, to be careful, to be safe. But now we find ourselves in the coronavirus or other situations where there is some risk, but it's hard to define the risk, or there's a very small risk. And some people maybe are nervous about certain things, other people are not nervous. And how far do you go? If there's any chance of risk to life, is there an obligation from the Torah to stay away from that? Is there an acceptable amount of risk? And if Rebbe could just explain a little bit, again, the parameters of pikuach nefesh, v'nishmartem, and again, how that applies to situations where there's some risk, but an unknown or a very small risk. With that, I'll give the floor to Rebbe.
Shalom Aleichem, good evening, everybody. Just before I start to answer the question, I wanted to mention that not only did I visit in Onset in the summertime, my aunt and uncle used to live in a neighborhood in different communities. Rabbi and Mrs. Leon Mosesen. Mrs. Bracha Mosesen was my aunt, and Leon was my uncle by marriage. And I used to visit, I used to stay by the Millens. I think they lived in Roxbury when my monarchy was in Roxbury. And then I used to visit by my uncle in Malden and go to the Rav Shir, Motzei Shabbos, and so on. So I have a connection with your part of the world from a long time ago. About Sofek Sakana, and of course, Kenny, I have a connection with the yeshiva. Kenny took care of the Rav. Kenny used to, when the doctor said that the Rav shouldn't give a shiur more than 2 hours, Kenny was the only one who could do it. He would close the Rav's Gemara and take him arm in arm and take him out of the classroom. And the Rav needed that because otherwise he would continue to give the shiur for 5 hours. And that was against the doctor's orders. So we thank Kenny for taking care of the Rav for those important years. Regarding Sofek Sakana, the Gemara says, "Lehoch bebikuach nefasha sachar haroiv." You have no right to go bas haroiv in a Sofek Sakana. So let's say on Shabbos, someone is sick, and the odds are 9 to 1 that he's going to die anyway, even if you'll be Mechal Shabbos to take him to the hospital. The odds are 9 to 1 that he's going to survive anyway, even if you wait till Motzei Shabbos. But there's a 10% chance, or even a 5% chance that going to the hospital on Shabbos, being Mechal Shabbos, or eating on Yom Kippur may save his life. So the Gemara says you have no right to go bas haroiv in either direction, whether the roiv is that he's going to survive anyway, the roiv is that it's going to die anyway, you have to be choshish for the miyut. So the question is, so what if it's 1 chance in 5 million, billion, zillion, trillion? Also, it's called the Sofek Sakana. So that's ridiculous. So the Chassam Sofer says that if it's such a far-fetched Sofek Sakana, then you say, Batla Daita, you just give them a tranquilizer, tell them not to be nervous about it. There's a limit to what's considered a Sofek Sakana. What if it's a slight Sofek Sakana that many people are not nervous about and some are nervous about this? Let's say 5-10% of the population would be nervous about this, and 90 and 95% of the population is not nervous about this. So then the Gemara quotes the pasuk from Tehillim that we recite in the Psukkah de Zimra on Shabbos and Yantav, Shomer P'sayim Hashem. Shomer P'sayim Hashem means that if it's a far-fetched Sofek Sakana, that most people are not nervous about, so then halacha says that you're not mechuyev to be choshish, and it's not considered putting yourself into sakana if you proceed without being concerned about the sakana. The Chachamim tell us that the 40 years that Bnei Yisrael were traveling in the Midbar, the weather conditions were such that there was a slight suffix sakana to perform a bris milah. So all the 40 years that Bnei Yisrael were in the Midbar after Yitzias Mitzrayim, before they crossed over the Yarden to enter Eretz Yisrael, in the days of Yeshua ben Nun. So for all the 40 years, all of the Shvatim none of the Shvatim observed the mitzvah milah, except for Shevet Levi. Shevet Levi had more bitachon, and they did perform bris milah, even though there was a slight suffix sakana. So the Chazam Sofer in his Chuvas raises the question, but they had an Orthodox rabbi there, Moshe Rabbeinu. So what did he say about this? If it was really a suffix sakana, so Shevet Levi should have been admonished. He should have told them they're not allowed to perform bris milah. They're putting the babies b'sakana. And if Shevet Levi is right, so he should have told all the other Shvatim that they should all observe bris milah. How did Moshe Rabbeinu allow Shevet Levi to perform the bris milah, the other Shvatim not? So there's some sefer works on that kasha. So I think what's usually assumed is, Pasha B'Shat and the Gemara, that it was a slight suffix sakana, and the din is that you don't go basaroi when it comes to suffix sakana. So for those who are nervous, so it's considered suffix sakana. For those who are not nervous, so for them you say Shamib P'sayim Hashem is not considered a suffix sakana. So right now it seems that I know in my neighborhood, I live in Washington Heights. Right now I happen to be on vacation. I'm in the mountains, but I'm in the Catskills, but I live in Washington Heights. Some of my neighbors died. Some of my neighbors younger than me died. It was nowhere near 50-50. I don't even think it was 10% of the people in the neighborhood, small percentage of people. So those who are nervous are wearing masks and they're careful. And those who are not nervous are not wearing masks and they're not being careful. And you can see both of them. I can understand why those who are not nervous, they say Shem P'sayim Hashem. It's nowhere, the suffix sakana is nowhere near 50-50. So as far as they're concerned, it's not called the suffix sakana. But for those who are nervous, then they should wear masks. If let's say I'm davening in a shul, the whole time I was in Washington Heights, I didn't daven in shul from the day after Purim until I came on vacation, the last week in June. I didn't even go to shul on Shabbos and Yantiv, not Pesach, not Shavuos. I stayed home the whole time. I didn't daven in the shul. But over here, where I am now, hardly anybody is in shul. There's a minyan every day, and all the windows are open, and everybody's wearing masks. So I don't feel nervous at all. But some of the people come to the shul here, they don't want to wear masks. That's not right. If all the people in the shul are concerned, and we are all insisting that everyone should wear masks, then for us it's a suffix sakana. So those who are coming to daven in our shul, on their own, when they go on their own, they don't have to wear a mask. If they're not nervous, they say Shamib P'sayim Hashem. For them, it's not a suffix sakana. But since for us, from our perspective, it is a suffix sakana. So when they come to daven in our shul, they have to put on a mask and have to sit in the designated seats. They put the X's on the seats where they don't want anybody to sit, and they put checks on the seat where you're allowed to sit, so that there's about 6-7 feet in between all the different people. So those who come, even if they're not nervous, but since we are nervous, so for us it's a suffix sakana. So they have to follow the rules and regulations of the shul.
Okay, thank you, Rebbe. The next question, one of Rebbe's early psakim was during Sfiras HaOmer, that Rebbe said it was permitted, Rebbe even to some degree encouraged people to listen to music, even play live music, especially Friday, getting ready for Shabbos. And Rebbe stressed the importance of keeping a good cheer, a positive attitude. So could Rebbe just discuss the halachik background to that? I mean, when we would allow music, even live music, was that only because it was pikuach nefesh, or no, that wasn't because of pikuach nefesh? Would that apply to someone who's even in Shiva, who's so down? So if Rebbe could just explain a little bit about that, just the prohibition of the music and why and when it would be permitted.
There are prohibition of listening to music when one is in Avelus is a minhag. It's not mentioned in the Gemara. In the Shulchan Aruch, they quote it as a minhag that developed. The original, I think the Rav Herschel Schachter explains, the original minhag was not to listen to dancing music, that the owl shouldn't get carried away and start dancing. And then they extended it to other kinds of music as well. Rav Soloveitchik used to say, this is what I was told by older Rabbanim, I never heard this directly. Dr. Lamb told us, and Maurice Lamb told us this, and people their age told us that the Rabbi used to say that classical music, he thought, is permissible to listen to in Avelus, that the meaning only applies to happy music. He thought classical music is art. The meaning is, the din, first we'll give, what's the definition of the din of Avelus? So there are 3 levels of Avelus, the Shiva, the first 7 days, the Shloshim, and then Yud Beis Chodesh. Our minig has it that Sphira has the lightest form of Avelus, has the form of Avelus. Every minig has to correspond to some kind of a din. You can't just have a minig to stand on your head on Wednesday mornings from 9 to 10 in the morning. Minig has to conform to some halacha. A minig is binding because it's a mitam neder, but only if it's a neder mitzvah. If it doesn't correspond to any din, so it's not a neder mitzvah. So the minig is that during Sphira we observe Avel, the mildest form of Avel is like Yud Beis Chodesh, after Shloshim. When it comes to Tisha B'Av, so the din of the Gemara, one has to observe Avelus on Tisha B'Av like Shiva. Then the minig has it, is not a din. The minig by Ashkenazim has it that we observe Avelus in the 9 days. Medina Mishnah, you only observe Avelus in Shavuot Shachal by Tisha B'Av, from Sunday till Tisha B'Av comes, if Tisha B'Av is later in the week. And Mitam Minig, the Minig has it that the whole 9 days we treat like Shiva, like Shloshim, and then starting from Shavuot B'Tammuz until Rosh Chodesh, we observe the mildest form of Avelus like Yud Beis Chodesh. So in these 3 different levels of Avelus, there's a different definition of what is expected. So in Shiva, the halacha requires nivel merubah. The person should be sloppy. In Shloshim, we require nivel b'miktsas, not nivel merubah. And in Yud Beis Chodesh, we don't require any nivel. We only require miut tanugim. And the halacha says whenever the observance of the Avelus passes the degree that it's supposed to be, let's say in the middle of Shiva, instead of only being nivel merubah, it already becomes mitztayer. The person, by not bathing, is going to be itchy and scratching and so on. Or let's say whenever there is an epidemic, it says in Shulchan Aruch, they quote the Maharil, in a period of an epidemic, if somebody dies, so the relatives don't observe Shiva. What do you mean they don't observe Shiva? They should bathe and they should wash their clothing, because when there's an epidemic, if you're not going to bathe, so you're gonna have the germs on you. You're gonna have the virus with you, and you have to wash your clothing to wash the germs out of the clothing. So you're not permitted to observe those aspects of Avelus. Whenever observing the Avelus will turn out to be more than the din required, then you don't observe it. So the Shiva is supposed to be nivel merubah, but if it crosses over the border, it becomes mitztayer, or it crosses over the border and may cause choli. The person it's an epidemic going on, and there is a choli, and this is going to prevent him from getting out of the choli, not bathing and not washing his clothing, then you're not allowed to observe that. And the same is true regarding Shloshim. Shloshim, let's say the person is not supposed to put on any clean clothing. He's going to wear a shirt, the shirt is going to be filthy. So the Pischei Tshuva writes in every day, it's a Dova Pashut, that he's allowed to change his shirt. Whenever the nivel b'mitzas becomes so severe that it becomes nivel merubah, so then that's more than the din requires. And then the Yud Beis Chodesh, all we expect is miyat tanugim. If the miyat tanugim becomes so severe, the observance of what it says on the books becomes so severe that it's going to already be a madrega of nivel, then it's more than the din requires. So the minig of music is that when a person listens to music, usually it cheers him up. It puts him in a happy mood. So we don't want to be in Avelus. We're not looking to be in a happy mood, but you're not supposed to be so miserable when one is in Avelus. So there's a girl in the neighborhood in Washington Heights who has a lot of medical conditions. And I remember she called me in the middle of Shiva when her mother passed away. And she said she's going out of her mind. If she doesn't listen to music, It's going to be terrible. She's going to be depressed. I told her she has to listen to music in the middle of Shiva. Sometimes not listening to music for her is more than the din requires. She has so many different medical conditions that this is just going to completely throw her off. So on Erev Shabbos, there's a special reason why. The Gemara says that in our calendar, it never happens that Tisha B'Av falls out on Friday. The only tightness that we have that falls out on Friday is Asara B'Tevis. But in the days of the Tanaim, when they used to have Kiddush HaChedesh Al Pi Ariyah, when they didn't have the fixed calendar that we follow today, so every so often Tisha B'Av would fall out on a Friday. So the Gemara discusses in Erev and Daf Mem, Rabbi Akiva's position was when Tisha B'Av falls out on Friday, you have to break the fast in the afternoon, late in the afternoon, because there's a consideration. It's not quite. It's not, on the one hand, it's not quite Shabbos to eat steaks on Friday. You should eat the Friday night meal litei oven. So you shouldn't eat fleishiks. It's not right to eat fleishiks on Friday. But on the other hand, if you're going to fast the whole day of Friday, then you're going to be starving when you enter Shabbos. Rabbi Akiva said that's not the proper thing. So you permitted even to break the tonus of Tisha B'Av. The Gemara says we don't paskin like Rabbi Akiva. We paskin when a tonus falls on a Friday, Misana Umashlim. By us, it only turns out on Asara B'Tevis. I have 9 children. So my oldest daughter was born on a Friday night, Motzoi Asara B'Tevis. And I had to walk. My wife was in the hospital, so I had to walk from the hospital. It was late Friday afternoon. It was already so late we couldn't take a taxi. Then another man, our wives had babies. So his wife had the baby on Asara B'Tevis. My wife had the baby on Leil Motzoi Asara B'Tevis. So we walked. We got to a friend's home. He called him in advance. We were going to eat by him. He waited 96 minutes to begin to make Kiddush. We were starving. We were fasting all day. This guy didn't have Rachmanis on us. So he waited 96 minutes till Tzei Sekacham. That was not really necessary, but he didn't ask me. Anyway, so we paskin that if Tisha B'Av falls out, or Asara B'Tevis falls out, on Erev Shabbos you have to fast the whole day, but still, not to enter Shabbos in a miserable mood and a down mood. So I thought for sure, maybe it's not enough to break the tonus of Tisha B'Av, but it certainly is enough. Not enough to break the tonus of Asara B'Tevis either. It certainly is enough to violate the minhag of not listening to music when one is in a state of Avela. So in order to put yourself in a better mood to accept Shabbos, I thought for sure that was a proper thing to do. And even not on Erev Shabbos, people were very down in the very beginning. People were very down. You were hearing people die to the right and to the left. I live in Washington Heights. The big apartment buildings. Every apartment building has so many apartments, so many different families. We're hearing people die to the right and to the left. People my age and younger than my age. So we were in a sad state. So I thought that the prohibition, the minhag, not to listen to music is not to get carried away with yourself listening to music, but just to put yourself in a state of equilibrium, not to be in a depressed state of mind. I thought that's not included in the minhag. After I told this to different people, so they had online that they asked Rab Chaim Kanievsky, and he said the same thing. I was happy. Okay, I'm not the only one. Okay, you don't have to get carried away with chumras. There are dinim and there are minhagim, and each thing has its own place. You have to know what the nature of the din is and what the nature of the minhag is, especially in Avelis. What motivates one to do something in Avelis plays an important role, whether it's prohibited or permissible. So if one listens to music just to be in a normal state of mind, not to be depressed, so that's for sure room to be makel on music.
Okay, thank you, Rabbi. So this is going to be the Zoom question, okay? The first part, if Rabbi wants to discuss, if he doesn't want to, that's fine. There is, a whole controversy of doing the Seder by Zoom. I think Rabbi wrote about that. I don't remember for sure. And the second part of the question is, there were some things that Rebbe wrote that someone could do by Zoom. So let's say forming a minyan to have 10 people by Zoom, you can't create a minyan. Someone can't say Kaddish, Kiddush, or Baruch Hu by over Zoom. But Rebbe said that someone could say Hagomel. Normally we require a minyan for Hagomel, but Rebbe, I believe, and Rebbe can correct me, said that someone could say Hagomel over Zoom as long as there be 10 men watching, or if there's a baby naming, a grandparent can't be present at the baby naming, so the grandparent should say the baby naming by Zoom. So if Rebbe could just clarify, what are the differences? Why certain things cannot be done by Zoom, and what are the things that could be done by Zoom?
Here in different parts of New York, New Jersey, and other communities, also in other states, there was an issue if you have different apartments near each other, but the people are afraid to mingle. So you have 3 people on one porch, 3 people on another porch, and 4 people on another porch, and they all can talk to each other, but they're on different porches, they're on different homes. Can you be mitzaref them to a minyan? So in the Mishnah in Brachas, it sounds like if some of the people mitzasham roim elu es elu, they can be mitzaref to count as 10 people to bench mezun, Baruch Elokeinu. If you have 10 people, you say Elokeinu. That's a simple reading of the Mishnah. So then the Rashba in a tshuva says, ulai, possibly the same is true regarding a minyan to say Kaddish Kedusha Baruch Hu. Even though to bench Mezuman Ba'asara, Rav Soloveitchik used to say that in Lithuania, the meaning was that when they would bench Baruch Elokeinu, they didn't stand up at all. In Germany, they would stand up completely. They would stand like this, Baruch Elokeinu Shachalnu Mishalai. And Rav Soloveitchik said that in Lithuania, they didn't even stand up, but they didn't even stand up like this, because he gave a whole shir, he showed from the Gemara that the bench Ba'asara is not a Dovish B'Kedusha. When you have a Dovish B'Kedusha, then you need a minyan. Here, it's not really a Dovish B'Kedusha. So the post can point out that the Rashba was misupik about that. The Rashba said maybe ulai, perhaps, just like the Mishnah, sounds like it says you can be mitzaref 10 people together for the purpose of mezuman to bench Baruch Elokeinu. Maybe the same is true regarding davening but tzibur. So that's really questionable. It's really not right to be mekel on that. A lot of times in the base of oval, when we want to accommodate the oval, so you have a lot of people come, let's say you have 15 people come to the base office. Instead of having all 15 stand in one room, so you have 7 in one room and 8 in the other room, 2 rooms that are next to each other, 2 rooms that open up into each other. So that's not really right. You should really have 10 people in one room. And the oval, the one who's going to daven for Anam, should be in that room. It's not right to be mitzaref a minyan. 9 people in one room, 9 people in the other room. More correct is not to follow that Rashba. The Mishnah Brura, we know for a fact, Mishnah Berurah, different parts of the Mishnah Berurah written by different members of the family. The Mishnah Chafetz Chaim divided it up. It's interesting, Lubavitch was requesting of the Russian government for years. The Russian government confiscated much of the Lubavitcher library in Europe, and they were requesting from the Russian government for the longest time they should give them back all of their svarim, which they did, gave them back a lot. They didn't give them back everything yet, they gave them back a lot. And included in what they have in 770 Eastern Parkway is something that never belonged to Lubavitch, the original manuscript of the Mishnah Berurah, the way it was sent to the printer. So they have the different parts of the Mishnah Berurah are written in different handwritings and different colors ink by different people. And they know which is the Chafetz Chaim's handwriting. So he, after whoever it was, wrote the different parts of the Mishnah Berurah, Chafetz Chaim put the finishing touches. He would sometimes add a line here and there. But he was the overall editor. Some parts were written by one of his sons, some parts were written by his brothers-in-law, and so different members of the family wrote different parts of the Mishnah Berurah. So that's why every so often there's a contradiction between one volume and the other. If you have the 3 volumes of the Kol Kisvei HaChafetz Chaim, so in one of the 3 volumes, there's a biography of the Chafetz Chaim, so written by one of the sons of the Chafetz Chaim. So he writes, I wrote this section, Hilchas Shabbos. My uncle wrote the other section. That's why there's a contradiction and a certain din, where they need bichdei sheyasu. If Yisrael did a malacha on Shabbos, where they have to wait for Tzoi Shabbos sheyasu, I came to the conclusion one way, and my uncle came to the conclusion the other way. So every so often there are contradictions in the Mishnah Berurah, and the style is totally different. When you look in Hilchas Sukkah sometimes reads like a Minchas Chinuch, very lamdish. Other parts, Chelek Aleph Mishnah Berurah reads like just a fancy Be'ehetev. Not at all like him, not at all like the rest of the Mishnah. Chelek Aleph was clearly written by somebody else. So here there's a contradiction in the Mishnah Berurah between Chelek Aleph and Chelek Beis. In Hilchas Birchas Hamazon, the Mishnah Berurah says that even by bench and mezuman, it's no good. If you have 5 people in one house and 5 people in another house, some of them can see each other. He says that you can't even though the simple reading in the Mishnah is like that, you can be mitzvah them to zimun, to bench ba'azaram. So the Mishnah Berurah thinks that we should paskin like the Vilna Gaon, and he quotes a Rishon that says like the Vilna Gaon, it's only if you have 10 people in one house and 10 people in the other house, they can bench zimun together. And if you have 5 and 5, they're not mitzvah from even to bench them, let alone for davening. And Halachik from Mishnah Berurah, he goes along with what it says in the Beheitev, that if it's a big shasat and it's going to be lasting for a couple of weeks, there's room to be makel, that they even chazaras hashatz, not only bench mizum, and even chazaras hashatz also, even kaddish kedusha baruch. So that's not really right. We should really follow what the Mishnah Berurah wrote in Chelik Beis, that even by bench mizum, and you can't be mitzaref people. Even if Mikzasim Roy Meilu Isel, if they're in different rooms, you have to have a minyan. You have to have 10 people in one place. Then the people in the other room can answer Kaddish Kedusha Baruch. This is a question. Let's say in New York there was one certain Hasidic minyan. We won't say where it was, where they maintained minyanim every single day through the whole epidemic. And whoever wanted to could call in, and you can listen, and you can answer Kaddish Kedusha Baruch Hu over the telephone. So that's a question whether that's correct or not. So these Hasidim who did this, they publicized that there's a prominent Galatiana Paisek whom they quoted from Rav Herschel Roth from Borough Park, who said, even if you're in a different state, you can answer Kaddish Kedusha Baruch Hu, since there's a minyan in this location where they're saying Kaddish Kedusha. They quoted the Rab Chaim Kanievsky said the same also. Shlomo Zalman Auerbach in his Sefer writes explicitly not so. He says, if you're in the same shul, the Gemara tells us that in Alexandria in Egypt, there was a gigantic shul. And there was such a crowd of people, they were so noisy, you couldn't hear the Chazan say the Chazaras Hashatz. So how did people know when to say Amen, when to say Kadosh, 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 when to say Baruch Hu? So they used to wave flags, and everybody knew what bracha they were up to. They can answer Kaddish Kedusha Baruch Hu. So it says in the Gemara, you can answer Kaddish Kedusha Baruch Hu even though you don't hear. So Shlomo Zalman thinks that's only because you're in the same room. But let's say you're outside of the shul, and you can hear, and they're waving flags, so he thinks that it's no good. And he thinks if you listen, I'm miles away. Let's say this minyan is somewhere in Brooklyn, let's say, and I'm in Washington Heights. I'm miles away from the location where the minyan is. Even though I know that they're saying Kaddish Kedusha Baruch Hu, he thinks that it's not permissible. You cannot answer a Davish B'Kedusha because you don't relay. So I personally was mekel on that. I every so often I would listen. I didn't go out of the house for the longest time, from the day after Purim till I came on vacation till the last week in June. I didn't go to shul on Pesach and on Shabbos on Yom Tov. I didn't go to shul at all on Shavuos. But every so often I would listen into this minyan in Brooklyn, and I would answer Kaddish Kedusha. I thought Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach's argument was not that strong. I thought that the others had a point, that if I know that they're saying Kedusha, I can answer along with them. Now, with respect to saying Birchas HaGaimel, so the Mishnah Berurah has this. He quotes earlier, Pasuk quotes the Pri Megadim, that there is no din to recite Birchas HaGaimel. It's not a Davish B'Kedusha. It's a din. You should only recite. Some Paskim are of the opinion that you can say Birchas HaGaimel with B'Shas HaTchak without 10 people. And even if you hold like the opinion that you're not Yetzer without 10 people, it's not a Davish B'Kedusha that you need all the 10 people together. So that the Gaimel should be recited in such a way that 10 people should be aware that you're saying Birchas HaGaimel. You're praising HaKadosh Baruch Hu barabim, in public. Barabim means that the people are aware. So true, what Reb Shlomo Zalman argues, when you listen on the radio or you listen on the telephone to somebody saying Kiddush and Havdalah, you can't really say Shemea Ka'ina. The Pashta says you can't say Shemea. Let's say I'll listen to the Megillah. If a person wants to hear the Megillah, so the Pashta says you hear the Megillah over a loudspeaker, you hear the Megillah over the telephone, the Pashta says that you're not Yotze. But Moshe Feinstein and Rav Soloveitchik both thought that maybe there's room to be mekel. So if you have a big Shas HaTchak, So there was room to be mekel, okay. But the Pashta says that you really not yet. That's not called Shemea. The sound waves are converted into electrical waves, and the electrical waves are converted back into sound waves. So it's Pashta says that it's not Shemea Koine. But by Birchas HaGemel, it's not a din based on Shemea Koine. It's a din. When I praise HaKadosh Baruch Hu, are there 10 people who are aware of the fact that I'm praising HaKadosh Baruch Hu? So there are. If you have 10 people listening in by Zoom, so 10 people are aware. So the Mishnah Berurah quotes this from the Pri Megadim, who has a mashal. He says, in Shulchan Aruch it says sometimes they will excommunicate a person, they'll put him in cherem. So cherem sometimes means, this is not really the definition of cherem, but if the Bezdin wants to, they can add on, this is like icing on top of the cake. If they want to, they can add on that you can't be mitzaref this person to a minyan. We want to exclude him from the community. Excommunicate him is excluded from the community. So if you have 10 people in shul, one of them is a cherem, so you don't have a minyan, you only have 9. But as far as Birchas HaGemel is concerned, even if one of them is in cherem, it's not that you don't need a tziruf of 10 people. It's not a davar shebikdusha. You need a tziruf. Just have to praise HaKadosh Baruch Hu in a public fashion so that 10 Jews are aware that you're praising HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So even if one of them is not mitzaref to the minyan, or even if all 10 are in 10 different buildings, they don't know of each other. But I know that 10 people know that I'm praising HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So then I recited the Birchas HaGemel in such a way that the public is aware. Public is heard the fact, even if they didn't hear Al Pidin, but they are aware of the fact that I'm praising HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's why I thought that for Birchas HaGemel wouldn't be a problem.
Rabbi, someone asked about slichos. We're going to be starting slichos somewhat soon. Let's say someone can't come to shul, they're not comfortable. They're going to watch or listen by Zoom. So would they respond in slichos like, I guess that'd be like any other davar shebikdusha.
Right. In the Achronim, there was a big machlokes by the reciting the Yud Gimel Minas Hashem Hashem Kel Rachman Chanon. Is that considered a davar shebikdusha or not? You need a minyan. So the common practice is that we are machmer, that we treat it like a davar shebikdusha, that you do need a minyan. But if you have a minyan in some location, you have a minyan in the shul, and then I'm at home and I hear them saying kedusha. So can I answer kedusha at home? So I thought that those who said yes, I thought they had a good point. I thought you can. According to Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, that they can't answer Kaddish Kedusha Baruch Hu, so then you shouldn't say you Gimel Midas either in Slichas. But the way many are mekel, I don't see that it's that difficult to be mekel on this issue. Many are mekel. So I thought if there's a minyan in shul, those who hear by Zoom can answer the Yud Gimel Midas. Yes.
Okay, thank you, Rabbi. One more davening related question. So many shuls, maybe hundreds of shuls, followed Rebbe's guidelines for laning, Kriyas Torah, in that Rebbe, like many people, suggested that the Baal Koreh should just get all 7 aliyahs and not give out different aliyahs, at least in the beginning, the first number of months. But I think Rebbe added that, and this was what we were doing until recently, the Israel of Brookline, that if one person is getting all the 7 aliyahs, so there won't be a maftir aliyah. And then additionally, normally there's a chatzi kaddish after the 7th aliyah before maftir, but that chatzi kaddish should be delayed until after the haftorah. So, which is what we were doing until we, now have a partition to allow people to get regular aliyahs. So I know many people, even many learned people, sort of when they saw that the first Shabbos, it was kind of strange to them. There was no maftir, and then suddenly, why? What does it have to do with the kaddish? Why, they didn't understand why the kaddish would then be moved. So if maybe Rebbe could walk us through that psak to just help us understand in general, we'll better understand in general, what's the point of the maftir, what is the point of that kaddish, and why the kaddish was moved once we took out the maftir.
Yeah, sure. The Gemara in Megillah has all the dinim of Kriyas Torah. So the Gemara has a machlokes amaroim whether the maftir is minyan akruin. Let's say on Shabbos you need 7 aliyahs. Means 7 aliyahs plus maftir, or 7 aliyahs including the maftir. Let's say a Yom Tov you give 5 aliyahs, Yom Kippur you give 6 aliyahs, means 5 plus maftir, or 4 aliyahs, and maftir is the 5th aliyah. So it's a machlekes how to paskin. So we paskin like the Rabbeinu Tam, machlekes the Rabbeinu Tam and the Rabbeinu Meshulam. So we follow the Rabbeinu Tam and Shulchan Aruch that really meikar adin the mafter result of the minyan akruim. That on Shabbos when you give 7 aliyahs, the 7th aliyah is the mafter. You don't have to have 7 aliyahs plus mafter. So why do we make a separate aliyah? So Taisus quotes Rabbeinu Tam. If we can satisfy the other opinion in the Gemara, why not? So since it's permissible to make Hosafis, we usually have the practice, we only make Hosafis on Shabbos, on Yom Kippur and on Yom Tov. When you give 6 aliyahs on Yom Kippur or 5 aliyahs on Yom Tov, usually we are machmer like the Iran. The Iran's opinion is only on Shabbos you're allowed to make Hosafis. You're not permitted to make Hosafis on Yom Kippur or on Yom Tov. But Mikra Adin, we don't pass like that. We pass, and you may make Hosafis. So the fact that we give 5 aliyahs on Yom Tov plus maftir, or 6 aliyahs on Yom Kippur plus maftir, or 7 aliyahs on Shabbos plus maftir, another aliyah, that's already a Hosafah. So if one ben is getting all the 7 aliyahs, you have to make 8 aliyahs. So it doesn't make sense. One person getting 7 shouldn't get hooked. The whole idea of making Hosafas is you want to share the wealth. Why should only 7 people get aliyahs? Give another 3 people aliyahs. But if the same person is getting all the 7 aliyahs, it doesn't make sense. You should make Hosafas. So then whenever one person is getting all aliyahs, so the last aliyah should be the mafter. That should be, the mafter will be counted as the 7th of the aliyah. So then the Gemara has a klal. The one who reads from the Navi has to learn a little bit from the Chumash Tchila. That's the Lashon of Gemara. So the Magen Avraham says, Tchila means that you're not allowed to have a pause. You shouldn't have a hafsaka in between the kriya of the mafter and the kriya of the haftarah. So that's why the Magen Avraham says there's a rare case in the Shulchan Aruch. We have a rare case today that we don't give, where I'm davening here in the mountains, the Balkari gets all the 7 aliyahs, and the 7th aliyah is the mafter. We didn't graduate yet. We don't have any partitions here, hardly anybody here in the shul, so we don't have what you have in your shul yet. So so the Magen Avraham has, and the Shulchan Aruch has the following case. It once happened in the yeshiva, this case. I remember in the yeshiva of Shabbos Parshas Vayikra, it was a long time ago. I was married already. So I'm married already 54 years. So it was around 52 years ago or so. So they learned Parshas Vayikra, and they gave Shvi, and they found a mistake next to the last pasuk in Shvi. So they're gonna, so that he's supposed to finish till a psucha or a stuma. So they finished till the end of the Shvi. So the Shulchan Aruch said, if you would find a mistake in the middle of first aliyah, second aliyah, 3rd, 4th, 5th aliyah. So you finish the aliyah, put away the Sefer Torah, take out a kosher Sefer Torah. But if you find a mistake in Shvi and you finished already till the end, so then it says in the Shulchan Aruch, you don't put back the Sefer Torah, take out another Sefer Torah just to make mafter a Hosafah. You leave it like that. So the Gabbai had to tell the man who was supposed to get mafter, there's no mafter today. And he told the Shvi, you're going to be the mafter. So then the Magen Avraham says in such a case that the Shvi is the maftir. So usually we say Chatzi Kaddish after the 7 aliyahs before we make the Hosafah, before we lean over the last few psukim for maftir. And then the one who's getting maftir says the haftarah right after that. But here, we're not going to lean over anything. The Shvi is the maftir. So in order not to have a hafsaka, hamafta b'novit tzarich sheyikra b'torah tchila, the word tchila has the connotation that you shouldn't have a pause, you shouldn't have a hafsaka in between the mafter and the haftarah. In the last few years, they started a new minig all over the world, even in Eretz Yisrael, that they lane maftir, and before the haftarah, they start making all the mishaberchs with Tzahal and for the Medina and for the President of the United States. They make all the mishaberchs for the Cholim. That's not right. The Magen Avraham says you should be careful not to be mafsik too long. We make a little bit of a mishaberch. That's a shtickle hafsaka, but it's not right to make a major hafsaka in between the mafter and the haftarah. So the mishaberchs, they're all in place, but it's the wrong place. You shouldn't make all the mishaberchs for all of the Cholim and for the Rosh Hamemshala and for the Medina and everything, for Tzahal. not in between the mafter and haftarah. The minhag used to be years ago that on a tiny tzibur, we give 3 aliyahs, and the shlishi is the mafter. So the minhag used to be that they used to say Chatzi Kaddish in between the aliyah of the shlishi and the reciting of the birchas haftarah and the haftarah. So Rabbi Kivega did away with that based on this Magen Avram. Whenever the last aliyah is the mafter, because on a tainus you don't make any hoysafis. People have to go to work. They have no time to make hoysafis. Is a bittul malacha, so you're not allowed to make any hoysafis. So the shlishi is going to be the mafter. So then you're not supposed to say Chatzi Kaddish. Once a year we do. On Tisha B'Av in the morning, the practice is that you give 3 aliyahs kisel banim of nevanim, and then you give 3 aliyahs, then you say Chatzi Kaddish, and then you say the haftarah. So that's taka murderous kasha. Why don't we follow the Magen Avram there? So later he gave a few suggestions when he gave the shiurim on Hilchas Tisha B'Av. All the suggestions were very difficult. The Pashta says that you shouldn't say Chazkad, but we don't know why that's the minhag. But on the Tainus Sibur, the minhag is clear that since the shlishi is the mafter, so you don't say the Kaddish till after the birchas haftarah is over. That's the Magen Avram. Whenever you found a mistake in Shvi and you're laying, and then you can't continue to lay it, but you finished the whole Seder already. So you don't take out another Sefer Torah to make mafter as a separate aliyah. So you let Shvi be the mafter. So then you don't say Chatzi Kaddish, you say the Chatzi Kaddish after the Gemara of the birchas haftarah. Yes?
Okay, thank you, Rabbi. One medical halacha question. This will probably be, I think, depending on how long it takes Rabbi's last question. So, we all read in the news, there was a time when there was a great worry. Maybe there actually was. There were not enough ventilators. There are certainly people who were worried there would not be enough ventilators. And Rabbi wrote some about the different questions that came up. I actually know that he's not on right now, but many people know Yonah Rubin now, who's in medical training here in Boston. I think some of the impetus of Rebbe's writings were questions he asked Rebbe, I believe. And there are different questions that Rebbe dealt with. Moving a ventilator from one patient to another patient when unfortunately there weren't enough ventilators. Switching someone from a regular ventilator to sharing a ventilator, which I guess it actually would say was lowering the quality of care, and a lot of very, very difficult questions. So if Rebbe's able to, again, Rebbe's about 12 minutes, what Rebbe thinks is appropriate to discuss in that time. But I guess in general, in broad strokes, what were the questions that Rebbe was asked, and what did Rebbe say? What guidance did Rebbe give?
The Mishnah in the end of RIETS gives us guidelines. If a few people are drowning, and you can only save one person or the other, so whom should you save? So the Mishnah has guidelines, and the Rambam quotes it, and Shulchan Aruch quotes it. Nobody disagrees that you first save the Kohen. Then if you can save more, then you save the Levi. Then you save the Israel. Then you save Cholol, and Nasan, and Mamzer, a whole list of hierarchies. So Moshe Feinstein wakes up after 2,000 years, and he says, what do you mean? Nobody follows that. What happened over here? So the Pashtus seems to be, we don't follow that Mishnah. Why not? So the Pashtus seems to be, in the Shulchan Aruch, they quote from the Talmud Yerushalmi there at the end of RIETS, that if 2 people are drowning, one is a Talmid Chacham and one is a plain person. So the community needs a Talmid Chacham more than the plain person. So the Gemara was written by rabbis, so maybe that's why they wrote. But the rabbis assume that the community needs the rabbanim more than the plain balabas. So he saved the rabbis. Then it said, what if 2 rabbis are drowning? One of them knows how to say din, and one of them knows how to say big pilpul. So the Yerushalmi says we need the sadron takes precedence over the palpalon, the one who has all the din and mesudar, the paskans halach l'maisa. So the rule seems to be that if you can only save one person, you have to save the one whom the community needs more, the one who's going to make a bigger contribution to the community. So we are assuming that the Kohanim are probably going to give a greater contribution than the Leviim. Leviim are going to give a greater contribution than Israel. We're going to do more mitzvahs. And if a man and a woman are drowning, so the man is going to contribute more to the community than the women. So that's what Rav Moshe Feinstein says in recent years, maybe the last 1,000 years. We don't follow that. It's not necessarily so that men contribute more to the Jewish community than women. We live in a generation where many women are more learned than men, and women do more mitzvahs than the men. Women don't go to shul. In the weekdays, the men daven in shul, but a lot of times the women contribute more to the community than the men do. So it really depends on who's going to contribute more. So one might have thought like this. Let's say there's a person who's 85 years old. How much longer is he going to live? Another 15 years, another 20 years, to the age of 105. Okay, he's going to live 20 years. Another person is sick. He's only 25 years old. He's going to live many more years. So one might argue and think that the one who's going to live longer was probably going to give more of a contribution to mankind or to the Jewish community. The one who's going to live shorter. So that's why Moshe Feinstein says we don't say it like that. The Gemara has a klal, ein doicha nefesh mipnei nefesh, because we say, the Gemara's expression is, who can say that his blood is redder than my blood? Who can say, even though he's only going to live another 20 years and the other one's going to live another 80 years, maybe he will accomplish more in his 20 years than he will accomplish in his 80 years. So we can't say who's going to accomplish more. So it's hard to say. So the poskim have a little bit of klum. So say, let's say, one person is so sick, it's highly questionable whether our efforts are going to help at all on him. May not help at all. The other person, we can never tell. The other person, the likelihood is much stronger that the efforts will help. He's not that sick. He's younger and healthier. So if you only have one ventilator, so you should give it to the one where it's kemat vadai that it's going to help, as opposed to the safek, whether it's going to help at all. Or let's say by one person, to say one is going to live longer than the other, that we don't consider that, because how do you know who's going to accomplish more? But let's say one person, even if we'll extend his life, he's deathly sick. Not even extending his life, we don't think we will succeed in extending his life more than 12 months. So that's called Chai Shor. And the other person is young and healthy, basically, and if we'll extend his life, he'll probably live much more than 12 months. That's called Chai Olam. Nobody lives forever. It's not literally Chai Olam, but that's what Rav Moshe Feinstein, Rav Chaim Ozer, others disagree, but that's Rav Moshe Feinstein, Rav Chaim Ozer assume that's the definition of Chai Olam versus Chai Shor. So if you have only one ventilator and you can only give it to one person or the other, and one of them, it looks like we will be able to extend his life more than 12 months. The other one is only Chai Shor. So then the Gemara says that the Chai Olam takes precedence over the Chai Shor. If you already gave the ventilator to a patient who came into the hospital, and then another patient comes in, so then if you're going to you only have one ventilator, and the chances of saving the second one are much greater than the first one. The second one is going to have Chai Olam, and the second one is Karb Levadai, that it will work, and the first one is only a safek, whether the ventilator is going to help at all. But once you already gave the ventilator to the first one, then you're not allowed to take it away. Take away the ventilator, so that's mamish shvichas dam, and that's vitzicha. So then you say, ein doicha nefesh mipnei nefesh. But let's say in the beginning, when they didn't have enough ventilators, and we knew that every day, someone comes in 6 o'clock in the morning. We know in another hour, another patient is going, many more patients are going to come in. And the first one who came in, we know that he stands a very schwache chance of surviving. And if he does survive, it's only going to be Chai Shor. And we know for sure that other people are going to come in later with a higher likelihood of a chance that they'll survive, or they will survive longer than 12 months. They're going to have a Chai Olam. So then I assumed, many assume like this, that's considered bo b'vasachas. You don't, just because the first one came in at 6 in the morning, the second one comes in, the second chayda comes in at 6:30 or 7 in the morning, that's not considered bo b'zachas, because at 6 o'clock we knew that there were a couple of days in New York that we had over 500 deaths every single day in New York City. over 500 deaths every day. So we knew that every hospital is going to have many, many sick people. They couldn't even take care of so many people. Many of the people who died in the hospital, the Chevra Kadisha claimed they took them out. They were in the hospital for days. Chevra Kadisha took them and they said they didn't even have any intravenous put into them. They had nothing. The people in the hospital couldn't take care of them at all. They were overwhelmed with so many patients. They couldn't do anything. So that's what I thought, that if you know at 6 o'clock that many more people are going to come in the course of the day, and the other people are going to have a better chance of surviving. So I thought that that's considered bo b'vasachas, and bo b'vasachas, if one is sofik hatzol and one is karv levadai, that is going to work, and one is going to be a chayol and one is going to be a chayshah, then you save the ventilator for the one who's going to be the chayol. Yeah.
Okay. We just have a couple minutes left. I want to take these last couple of minutes to thank Rebbe, to thank Rav Schachter. One of Rav Schachter's faults is that he doesn't really know how to say no. And if anyone asks him a question, everyone asks him a favor, he doesn't really know how to say no. So when I asked Rav Schachter if he would give a shiur in his very busy schedule amongst his many other responsibilities, the only question was, when would you like to do it? And I'm sure that everyone who was on the shiur tonight enjoyed, learned a lot. I certainly did, and we want to thank Rebbe, and we want to wish Rebbe a ksiva chasima tova. You should have a good year. We should have a good year. And I'll just leave Rebbe just a minute if Rebbe wants to conclude with anything, or just wish everyone a ksiva chasima tova. But I'll leave Rebbe just the last minute or two.
Sure. The Gemara in the last parak in Yuma quotes the Tana Rav Masya ben Chorosh, who lived in Rome. There was a Jewish community in Rome, Bisman Bayisheni. I remember when we were touring in Rome a few summers ago. So they told us that there's a Jewish cemetery there from the days of the Bayisheni. So the Gemara quotes every so often, Rav Masya ben Chorosh lived in Rome, and he had the Abba Chiluke Kapara. There are 4 different types of averos that people do, and they need different kaparas. So sometimes the rule is, even though the person did tshuva for the avera, and even though Yom Kippur comes and goes, and the person did tshuva, he still has to suffer yisurim to get a kapara. So I remember when I was a Talmud in the yeshiva, and the mashgiach, some of you may remember, Rabbi Lesson was the mashgiach, so he was fond of quoting the Gemara at Heichan Tachlis Yisurim, the Yisurim that a mechaper don't necessarily have to involve physical pain. If it has psychological pain, even mild psychological pain also counts as Yisurim. So he would always quote the Gemara, person put his hand in his pocket to take out a nickel, then by mistake he took out a quarter, and he feels a little aggravated, so he has to put his hand back in the pocket in order to take out the nickel. He took out the wrong coin. That also counts as Yisurim. So I think all of us, I suffered physically, I didn't suffer at all, but psychologically, I found it I was extremely uncomfortable in the early times, and now it's still not so gewaldic, but there was certainly a lot of psychological suffering going on now, and it should be a kapara for all of us. The Gemara has a discussion beginning of brachas, the way the commentaries interpret the Gemara, that Yisurim HaMechaper, is that only if the person has in mind the Yisurim should be Mechaper, or even if he doesn't have that in mind. So some of the commentaries on the Gemara understand Yisurim HaMechaper even if you didn't have in mind. There should be a kapara for all of us. Let me close with a story from Rav Soloveitchik. You people are Rav Soloveitchik's backyard. Rav Soloveitchik used to give a shiur in New York area for many years in Maria. That was a shul on 80th Street and Broadway. It was an office building. Now it's no longer an office building. Now it's a department store. And the whole entrance, where we used to go up to the shiur was on the 2nd floor. The whole entrance is all blocked up, so the whole Maria shul doesn't exist anymore. But he used to give the shiur there. So there were a couple of weeks where they were doing construction in the building, and they had to move the shiur to a different location. So he gave the shiur in the Young Israel in Manhattan, and then they went back to the original building of 80th Street and Broadway. So when they went back, Rabbi Soloveitchik said that this was also a form of golus, that they had to move the shiur from the normal location to a different location. And golus is mechaper. So he told over his story about the Vilna Gaon, that the Vilna Gaon once took sick. And the doctors came. The Vilna Gaon didn't like to have anything to do with doctors. As the doctors are for goyim. For the Jews, they're supposed to have bitochen, and daven, they're supposed to have doctors. But some frumma Jewish doctors were there, and they said the reason why he's sick is because the air was a little polluted, and they wanted him to go in the outskirts of Vilna, not so far. They didn't tell him to go to a different city. Just go on the outskirts where there's like a forest, and have all the svarim there. I'll have a shul over there, and he should go there, and the air won't be so polluted. It'll be healthier. So he didn't listen, and the Vilna Gaon refused to go. And they got all the rabbanim and all the dayanim. Everybody was talking themselves blue, and nothing helped. So they sent a message. The rabbanim in Vilna sent a message to Rab Chaim Volozhin, who lived in Volozhin. Could he please come and convince the Vilna Gaon that he should go to the outskirts of Vilna, so in order that he should get better? So Chaim Volozhin, he came, he spoke to the Vilna Gaon 2 minutes, and the Gaon went right away. So they asked him, what did you tell the Vilna Gaon? That after 2 minutes, he agreed. So he said, he told the Vilna Gaon that there's a Gemara in the second parak in Makras Elohein HaGolan. The Gemara there talks about one who kills B'Shoigeg has to go to one of the Ori Miklot. So one if the person is Ori Miklot used to be Ori HaLevim. It belonged to the Levim, and the people who live there all year long were Levim. So what if one of the Levim who lives in one of the Ori Miklot kills somebody else B'Shoigeg? So where does he have to go? He has to go to a different Ori Miklot. So the Gemara says, no, if a Ben Levi was Harag B'Shoigeg, this Gala Mishchuna L'Shchuna. He lives in this neighborhood. If he goes to another neighborhood in the same city, he's Yaitze the Chiyav Galas. So Rab Chaim Volozhin has said to the Vilna Gaon, maybe you did something wrong for which you deserve Galas. And if you go Mishchuna L'Shchuna in the same city, that'll also be Mechaper. That'll also be Galas. So Vilna Gaon said, so he's going to go. This should all be a kapara for all of us. This is a form of Galas. We can't go where we want to go. I always go to Eretz Yisrael in the summertime. I participate in the NCSY program. I go touring in Europe a little bit to see where the Jews used to live. And we're missing, right? My wife says, my granddaughter, one of my granddaughters in Eretz Yisrael is getting married before Rosh Hashanah. I'm going to miss the wedding. I can't go and quarantine for 14 days. They come back and quarantine again 14 days. I'm going to miss the wedding of a grandchild. That's so we feel as if we're all in Golas. So the Golas and the Yisurim should be mechaper for all of us. We should all be blessed with the Shana Tova Mesukah. We should be potter from this tzara, and we should look forward to healthier and happier years. Ksivach Sema Tova to everybody.
Amen. Thank you very much, Rabbi. Ksivach Sema Tova to you, to the Rebbitzin, and to everyone. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night. Thank you very much, Rabbi.
Okay, good.